David Rush, welcome back to Italy.
Nice to be here.
Well, first of all, it's been a bumpy year, a very uncertain year from different points of view. Trade war, and then the Trump administration under siege, and then regional crisis, and we'll talk in Asia. But at the same time, Wall Street is smashing one record after the other, and investors continue to be very optimistic, at least on the equity side of portfolios. Are they right?
They're probably wrong. The risks are, of course, that after this trade deal is signed with China, between China and the US, assuming it is signed, which is not certain, then all the good news, as we say, will be in the price. What else are you looking for? World growth is terrible. Countries are falling to bits. Latin America looks like it's going backwards. And I can go on and on and on. We have Hong Kong, we have everything. And the damage by the trade war is not going away. We're in a period of irreversible deglobalization. That is extremely bad for corporations. So no, trouble is down the road. The question is, it's always not yet.
So time to take some of the gains off the table to reduce the risks in portfolios?
Personally, I would take money out of equities now. I think most of the good news is priced in, and I would put it into gold, because I think most of the news is there is not priced in, the bad news.
I see, but how about the global economy? The IMF says there's a synchronized slowdown, but at the same time, we are all waiting for a signal in terms of the trade war that has been impacting the economy so far in a very remarkable way.
The IMF are normally behind the curve. I mean, we know there's a slowdown. It's been going on in manufacturing for a year. Now it's spreading into services. And so the slowdown is there, and it's related to global trade, confidence, and investment. So that's there. Now the question is, will the trade deal between Trump and China reverse it? And the answer is no, it won't. It'll give you a pause. This is not a truce. It is not a treaty. It is a pause. And once that is there, then the big issue, which is the confrontation between the rising power of China on the global scenario and the declining power of a mismanaged US, will continue to breed conflict between the US and China about many more things than trade. And so it ain't over yet.
So it's a war and a confrontation for leadership, global leadership, and especially technological leadership.
Yes, technology is a part of it, because it's how it's China's major dependence on foreign input is US technology into China. But technology is core to China because it's how it delivers its social contract. On every front, technology is key. So China will move to actually growing its own technology increasingly in the areas where it still is in deficit. And it will never trust the US again, and will move away from trading with the US. But that does not mean that you move into total protectionism.
Well, you said that US has been mismanaged, but at the same time, President Trump claims the record at Wall Street and the state of the economy has his success in managing the country. What do you make of that?
Well, the success of a stock market is not the success of an economy, and it is not the success of a country. It is the good luck of the mainly rich people who invest in it. First of all, let's get that straight. Second of all, if you look at the other balances in the US economy, the trade deficit, nothing's happened. If you look at the fiscal deficit, terrible. If you look at debt to GDP, terrible. So where are the achievements? The achievements are in achieving billions for billionaires and remaining in office. That is not a durable model for the United States. End of story.
Well, David, in 2016, Trump has not been elected by the elite. He's been elected by people who's not maybe investing and gaining so much into the equity market. Do you think that it's likely that in 2020 it will happen again? It will be Trump again?
I think it's a much more difficult thing because, as you say, he was elected by people who wanted a populist to defend their manufacturing jobs or whatever. And what they got was a president who defended billionaires. So it's going to be more difficult. Will he be elected again? He has probably still got a 50% chance of being elected again. The only candidate who could, at the moment in the polls, beat him convincingly is Biden. Now, that is a big question mark. If it is either of the other two major candidates, they would lose convincingly.
Do you expect, for example, Bloomberg to step in or a third runner to step in?
Oh, there will be more runners, though progressively less, obviously, as the Democrats, as the Democrat system of selection winds its way forward. Bloomberg will come in, but I do not think he's a political winner.
I see, but impeachment hearings are underway. Do you think that this will impact the run for the White House looking ahead?
Look, it'll obviously impact the run for the White House, and there are many ways. But let me say, impeachment is not a legal trial. It's not like I put you on trial for murder in an Italian court. Impeachment is a political trial, and people will vote politically. Therefore, it is likely there will be an impeachment process because of what Trump has done and what he has admitted to doing. But it is most unlikely it will result in his conviction because there are not enough Democrat senators in the Senate.
Well, Trump is also blaming the Fed for their interest rate policy. But apparently, Jay Powell has entered a pause in his path in terms of interest rates. And do you think that this level of interest rates is kind of proper for the state of the economy, or the siege to the Fed will drive Powell and his colleagues in another direction?
I think Powell is on hold. I think the Fed is on hold. I think they've done enough. I don't think they're going to be pushed around, if they were, which I doubt, by Trump. I don't think what Trump knows about monetary policy is particularly deep, but I do think that what he knows about getting re-elected is, and he is going to use the Fed as what we call a whipping boy, blame it for anything that goes wrong, and give himself full credit for anything that goes right.
How do you see Europe in this situation?
I see Europe as being very static, very stable. I don't see major problems cropping up in Italy over the next year, year and a half. They might deserve to, but they probably won't. I don't think the new leadership, Lagarde, at the ECB is going to change either ECB policy dramatically. It's a rule-based organization, and the rules are bigger than any individual. And I don't think the ECB is going to really succeed in persuading anybody, and particularly the Germans, to spend their savings surpluses, their fiscal surpluses, in a meaningful way. I don't think fiscal space is going to be spent in Europe in the countries which have any fiscal space.
So the European economy will continue to lag the US and the Asian economies in the future?
Well, the Asian economy is a big question, which we could spend another hour on. I think Europe will continue to lag the US. The US growth rate is going to come down. Europe's growth rate is going to stay at someplace between 1 and 1.3%, which is frankly a statistical error, and that's going to go nowhere.
Well, talking Asia, David, you live in Hong Kong, and we all see on TV day by day now what's happening in the streets. And how do you see the evolution of the crisis, which has been going on for a very long time today?
The crisis is very bad, and in my view, it is getting worse. I'm not taking sides in the crisis. What I am saying is I do not see any solution in sight. There are therefore two outcomes. Number one is possibly Hong Kong continues to in this way, in which case it becomes economically much less significant. But nobody takes any geopolitical notice. The other is that China intervenes directly. If China intervenes directly, you are back to something close, but not exactly the same as Tiananmen Square. There will be blood on the streets. At that point in time, the trade deal is out the window, no matter what Trump thinks. Taiwan will move away from China, which China cannot tolerate. And these costs, becoming a pariah again, are enough to make China pause for thought and say, well, maybe the political cost of intervention is too high.
Is there anything that could change this situation?
Flexibility on behalf of the government in dealing with the protesters' demands, in dealing with the social issues such as lack of housing and lack of jobs for young people. Of course, there are always ways to diffuse a political crisis. It requires political insight and imagination. Unfortunately, these are two commodities which are sorely lacking.
Will this one of Hong Kong be the major risk for financial markets looking ahead in 2020, or you see something different at the horizon?
No, I think if the crisis remains as it, more or less as it is, with unfortunately continued decline in Hong Kong and stress and distress in Hong Kong, then I don't think it'll be a major factor in world markets. If there is intervention, direct intervention by China and Hong Kong, it will become the major factor.
Well, David, let me close with where we started in terms of the outlook for versus 2020. What kind of year will be for investors? You already said reduce risk and go to safe havens like gold, but looking at the relation between equity and bonds, it's kind of a, the market is going the other way around.
The likelihood is that central banks, knowing the cost of increasing interest rates, will keep bond yields very low. If the economies are weaker, then the central banks will probably move to managing the yield curve much further out the maturity spectrum. The likelihood of losing a lot of money on bonds is therefore not great. The risks, I think, are that there are so many bond markets in negative yields, and people are chasing positive yields into areas which are highly risky and highly illiquid. I think we are building up instability down the road. Whether it actually comes home to roost like a vulture on a tree next year or the year after, I don't simply know. But for the moment, I would say start being pretty cautious about your money.
David, when we met last time, you were just out with a book, The Death of Democracy. Wasn't that a little bit exaggerated given what happened in the world during last year?
No, it's not. First of all, it's not a one-year forecast. It's a forecast lasting decades. And what it simply says is a very simple economic truism. It is that democracies are not delivering a decent growth rate in living standards for their populations, one. And two, China is. Therefore, wise autocracies, probably not nice autocracies, but technologically competent autocracies are delivering a better deal than democracy. That is the reason why we are seeing the rise of populism in democracies, which are the major risk to democracies. I would stick by the book.
David Roach, thanks again. Hope to see you soon in Italy.
Thank you.